This is the first in a series, and I've told you most of it already, so about the ideas, so we'll skip that. But basically what I've noticed over the years is that we buy a car, we get a user manual. We buy a microwave oven, there's a user manual. We buy a computer, there's a user manual. No one ever gave you a user manual for the human body. And even though we go to school, and even though we learn all these things, we spend thousands of hours in school to learn about math and science and historical dates and presidents, and nobody ever teaches us about how we function. And really that's the most important thing that there is. So this is the user manual for humans, part 1, and we'll see how far the series goes. And we'll start off with some basic concepts, and then we'll expand into personal growth things eventually. But when it comes to health and stress, you can just check off for yourself. You can share with us, but what are some things that you are interested in changing, improving about your health? Pain, weight, strength, energy, well-being, clarity, focus, whatever. And once we talk about the body, we want to start thinking about it differently. So rather than thinking about the body as a physical machine that we take over to the hospital and we bring them the machine and they check it out and tell us what's wrong with it, we want to start thinking of the body as hardware and software. It's a whole ecosystem. So would you all agree that whatever it is that you checked off that you want to improve, or whatever it is that there's wrong with your body or the function, would you agree that there's something that isn't working right? Does that make sense? And if that something was working right, then you wouldn't have a problem. That makes sense too. So then the next question is, what is it that isn't working right? What level of function, what part is it that isn't doing its job? So we need to start thinking of the body in levels of function, and the lowest level is passive tissue. That's the bones and the cartilage, the fat tissue, blood, connective tissue. It's all the stuff that if you go to the hospital and they run a diagnostic test, that's what they measure. They take an x-ray, they see what's happening with your bones. They take a blood test, they see what sort of chemicals, which kind of molecules, which physical particles are in that blood test. They're measuring passive tissue, which really has nothing to do with function. It's an effect of something else. The next level up is active tissue. And active tissue is muscle. Muscle is a tissue that can change shape, and it performs all the function in the body. So when you move a limb, that's a muscle. When your heart beats, that's a muscle. When your blood pressure changes, that's a muscle in a blood vessel that constricts. So the passive tissue is a tertiary effect. The active tissue, the muscle, is secondary, but the primary function in the body is the nervous system, the brain and the nervous system that regulates all function. So once we truly understand this hierarchy, we know that it doesn't matter if you have an ulcer, or you have a headache, or you have a neck pain, or if you can't digest food. Whatever it is that's going on, it is not the problem of the body part, because the body part is only acting on the regulation from the brain. Okay? So whatever the issue is, there is an imbalance in the brain. And the only way that we can ever change it is if we change something about the brain, something about the way that the brain perceives it. So that's why we measure that in this office, and that's why we use that as the yardstick to know when we're making progress and when we're done. Health. what is health? We've already touched on that. That's when everything is working the way it should. And another way of saying that is, it's when your nervous system can process and coordinate all that information appropriately. So you have 100 trillion cells in your body. Every little cell is a little machine, a little miracle machine that can do all of the wonderful things that you can do. It can process oxygen and nutrients, it can make proteins, it has respiration, it has excretion, it does all these incredible things. If you put it in a solution, it will stay alive for forever, basically. And all of these cells are working in your best interest, but they can only work if they work together. And the nervous system is what helps them talk to each other so that you can coordinate the effort and keep you alive against the world out there, in the world out there. So we have this miraculous body-mind. It is self-healing, self-regulating, and it can heal anything. This sounds pretty basic, but think about this. Anything means anything. There is no condition that a human has not recovered from. There is no cancer that is 100% fatal. There is no disease that no one has recovered from. What that means is the mechanism for healing is built in. And it took me years and years and years to get that, you know, it's not some of the things. It's not the little simple things like a scratch or a thumbnail. It's anything. And the only limit is if we believe it can happen, and if there is some sort of interference, if there's something that is keeping that mechanism from happening. And that's what we're going to spend most of the time talking about. So when there is interference and when there is imbalance, what was it that happened? What's going on in the body? So then we want to talk about hardware and software. So we all know that a computer has hardware. That's the stuff that you can touch and the mechanistic and electronic parts of it. But we also need software to run the computer. Without the software, the computer is absolutely useless. It just sits there. Even with the power turned on, it is absolutely useless unless it has software and unless it has a way for us to interact with it. And the same holds true with the body. The physical tissue is useless without, it is only as good as the software operating it. What's a hardware lesion? Well, a gunshot, a knife wound, a broken bone, all those things, they're pretty obvious that there's something broken, there's something damaged about the physical machine. But what about diabetes? What about headaches? What about high blood pressure? You can't take a picture of it. So it's not the physicalness that's the problem. And yet, that's really the only thing that our healthcare system can address is the hardware stuff. So what we're going to talk about is the software. And we're going to realize that all degenerative diseases, that's 99+% of everything that affects people when they get older, that affects our seniors population, all of that is software problems. They're not suffering from gun wounds and broken bones. They're suffering from some regulation that isn't working. So when we start understanding that we are more software and that it's more signals, then we also start understanding that the medical model, as good as it is saving lives, it is based on something called reductionism. And reductionism means that if you take a machine, if you take something physical and you start taking it apart,